Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about an opening tip that I have for you, mainly on choosing your specific opening lines. I'm not going to be talking about how to choose your openings, like what specific big opening should you choose. Against d4, should you play, the Nimzo Indian? Should you play the Queen's Indian in response to white system? Should you play the Slav, the Queen's Gambit declined, things like that? No, I just want to talk about if you know your openings and what you are comfortable with playing, more or less, how you should choose the specific sub variations within them. So I think that there are different ways to approach the opening. First off, you can play for certain, you can play for a system-based opening. So, for example, the London system, if you only play a setup with, with bishop f4 and then playing c3 and e3 in every position, and then you just play that against everything. Or you can play positions that are that try to imbalance the game from early on in the opening. For example, if you want to play the Nimzo Indian, both sides have to comply after c4, e6, knight c3 and bishop e4. Black needs to be ready for all of the dynamic systems that white has. For example, the same-ish variation of their a3, takes and c5, where the game gets very imbalanced, and white will probably try to generate an attack with like e4 and then f4, things like that. Or additionally, the more wild approaches in the Nimzo is the move f3, and then after c5, d5, position can get very wild, castle to e4, and yeah, the game goes on. I believe something like that. So both sides really need to comply to get a very fighting game. And let's say if you play the Slav as black, then you might want to get a very imbalanced position. Let's say knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, e6, and then saying after bishop g5, oh, I want to play the Moscow. I know how to play with the Moscow. Then h6, dc4, e4, g5 there, and b5. Just an example where the position is very imbalanced. Black is up a pawn, but they've compromised their structure significantly. And so, if white does not want to get such a wild and crazy game like this, then they can immediately kill the game with like the exchange Slav, for example. And then knight c3, knight f6, bishop f4, and just the game continues. But it's a very symmetrical position, very equal. Though there are some tricks and traps that white can employ, but in general, this is just equal. There are a couple of approaches there where you can see that it really depends that for both sides to reach a certain type of game. So for example, a dynamic attacking game, that both sides need to actually allow this. Additionally, there's also the other approach of just choosing a very principled opening. For example, the Queen's Gambit decline against d4, or against e4 you can play e4, e5 and allow the Italian and the Ruy Lopez and things like that, where it has a very firm strategic ground and you're not playing for tricks, you're playing for strategic edges and things like that. For example, we can look at this one game that I played in Blitz today. My opponent started with d4, I played d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, and here religiously I've been playing this move c5 for the past maybe 3 years or so. But the thing is that after e3, knight c6, knight bd2, the main move has been queen b6 here, and this allows the very wild position after dc5, queen takes b2, rook b1, queen c3 is best, and bishop b5. So now this puts a lot of pressure on black's position, especially on the knight on b5 here, on c6 here. And so g6 is the move that I have been playing, but suddenly e4 is a move here, and the two moves for black are either a6 or taking on e4. Not queen c4. But after a6 takes, I believe that white can have a slight edge here with a move like bishop e3, bishop g7, bishop d4, queen a5, taking on d5, and getting this kind of position, castles, rook e1, queen c7, and knight b3, where you can see that a lot of positions the computer evaluates this as equal. For example, this set position. But as the black player, I don't want to be playing this position after investigating it, because white has maybe a compromised structure, but they have such tremendous piece activity with this going on the bishop, the knight just being very dominant on the e5 square, and I don't really want to allow this actually. And besides a6, just as a side note, d takes e4 is another move. And after castles, I believe, no, I think it's rook b3 first, something like this. Maybe it was bishop g7. b3. No, it was something about a piece sacrifice on f3. I apologize. It was something like this, like bishop d4, like castles. Yeah, I'm getting the move order wrong here, but just trust me when I say that there is tremendous compensation here in this line. 6 f3. No, it was actually bishop e5. Now I remember. Bishop e5, queen a5, and then castle here. And then take on f3, bishop c6, bc6, queen takes f3, and then knight d5 is the only move, sacrificing the full rook because our c6 pawn is hanging. And then after here, takes on d2, c4, and then f6 again is the only move, rook fd1, queen c3, and position objectively is equal according to the computer. But to get to this point, especially playing a blitz game, I don't want to be, rattling out all of these moves, trying to remember my theory in a 3-minute blitz game, where I could be much worse if I forget a single move. And especially if the end result is that I get such a unclear or miserable position that I don't personally like. So yeah, be very careful about choosing your openings and sub variations in the openings. Which is why after watching the lecture by Grandmaster Robert Hungaski, he discussed opening trends and preparation. I've decided to play this move e6, and after c3, which is played in the game, I played this move c5. Now this is actually the most challenging setup, I believe, against the London system, where black gets an equal game, but they can possibly fight for more if white is inaccurate. And it has some strategic ground to it. So the idea is that black wants to play bishop d6, queen c7, and not place his knight yet on c6, because the knight oftentimes just wants to go to d7 so he can support an e5 advance. Additionally, the knight on d7 allows the queen to keep contact with the c5 pawn. So yeah, this is a very challenging system against the London. After e3, bishop d6, bishop g3, queen c7, I want to play knight bd2, and now I played knight bd7 according to plan, and now d takes e5. Now this is probably not best, but here I should have played knight takes e5 here, just playing for e5 next, but I played queen takes e5. After knight b3, queen c7, my opponent played a very dubious move, knight b to d4. Now the idea is to play knight b5 and fork my queen and bishop, but I simply play the move a6, and I prevent the knight b5 plan, and now I can simply kick the knight away with tempo, so it doesn't really make much sense. Additionally, I think that I can also just take on g3 and I play e5, and that would be also good. But I play a6, and now queen a4, another questionable move. My opponent is basically playing for tricks, because they just want to play knight b5, making use of this pin, but it doesn't really have a firm strategic ground, because queen a4 misplaces the queen. And here what I should have done is just taken on g3, castled, and I play e5 next, maybe even c5, knight c5. But instead I play rook b8. Now this is not best because it allows white to take on d6, and then at least say that you don't double my pawns on the g file. But my opponent, having wasted so many moves with the bishop, like bishop f4 g3, decided not to take on d6, and he played bishop e2. Now I castled, then again I should have taken on g3, castled, and now bishop takes g3. So my idea is that I take on g3 only now that the rook has vacated the h file. H takes g3 and e5, and now this is just such a good position for black. Knight f5, which is a mistake because I play knight c5, unleashing a discovered attack on both pieces. But now queen c2. And now I continue with e4, attacking the knights, and so knight 3 d4 is necessary. Now I play g6. Now I just make this knight horrible on h4. And after my next move, I play queen e5. I can also play bishop g4 to exchange off the light square bishops and just infiltrate on the light squares. But here I decided to play queen e5 with the immediate threat of g4. And seeing that, my opponent panicked and played f4. And so I took on f3 here. And now we can see that the pawn structure is horribly ruined. So rook takes f3 needs to defend the pawns. And so now I play knight e4, attacking g3. And after king h2, I spot this nice tactic of taking on g3. After rook takes g3, knight e4. I'm replacing this, the knight, and I'm just attacking it. And simply white cannot defend this rook because the bishop's on e2, which doesn't allow for the knight to come back to e2. So they're forced to play knight f5, giving back the piece. But now I'm just up a pawn, and I have, and the white king is completely exposed. So rook h3, I play queen e5 check, g3, knight g5, attacking the rook. Rook h4, queen takes e3. I'm up 2 pawns now. Rook f1, rook b to e8, activating my rook. Bishop d1, rook e4, trying to treat the pieces. Rook hf4. Now rook f8, rook fe8, rook 4 to f2. Maybe trying to infiltrate here to e2, or kick my queen back. I play f5. Maybe questionable, but this is still good for black because it does weaken my king a bit. And after queen b3, I am losing a pawn, but I do spot this nice move, rook 4 to e5. And clearing out the e4 for my knight. And so after queen takes b7, knight e4, rook g2, rook a to e7, just trying to kick the queen away. Not necessary, but queen takes a6, king g7, bishop b3, which is a big mistake because I play now knight d3, and I'm attacking both the rook and possibly knight f3 next. And so after rook fg1, I play knight f3, and I play this move, and my pawn resigned because next is mate. So yeah, that just kind of showed that if white doesn't get their typical setup, for example, if they don't get their typical setup in the forcing lines after c5, and we saw before queen b6 and dc5, or maybe white is hoping for another system, that white that is not fighting for this immediate e5 advance, e6 with e5 next, then maybe they would be comfortable. But in this specific variation, I found out that my opponent is not comfortable here, and they immediately faltered. So that kind of shows me being the aggressor in this game. But I want to show a game where I was actually the recipient of such treatment. Here I was playing against Grandmaster Ilias Mirin. Surprisingly, I played Nigel Short in this random blitz session, and then immediately after I played Ilias Mirin. So fun fact. Here I played d4, my opponent played knight f6, knight c3. So I'm trying to go for the Jabava London after d5, bishop f4, a6. So now the thing is that after e6, the main idea is to play knight b5, trying to misplace a knight slightly, and I think it's equal. I made a video from the black side discussing this, but I think that this is kind of what white is arguing, right? That knight on a6 is kind of misplaced. So it gives white some ideas to play for. Meanwhile, my opponent played a6, immediately shutting down knight b5. Also, another thing that I want to mention is that I've seen this trap so many times, and I played it myself, that if black goes for the c6 setup, I know that they're probably going to mess up. After bishop f5, knight f3, e6, knight e5. And I've had so many games that continued like this. Knight bd7, g4, bishop g6, and h4. And suddenly black is just worse. A couple of people have taken an e5 here, played knight e4, but after h5 I'm just winning a piece. So that's an example of a trap. But I just want to show this variation because it shows the idea of knight e5 being very strong. But in this game, after bishop f4, a6, they cut out my knight b5 idea, play e3, e6, knight f3. I should have played a3 probably to prevent bishop b4, but now they play c5. And now my ideas of putting the bishop on d3 are not that effective because they play c4, and my bishop has to move back one more square. So now I'm kind of stuck here because I don't get my preferred setup. And so I play a very dubious move with knight e5 here because knight e5 doesn't do anything, and there are no pieces to attack in black's camp. No bishop on d6, for example. And so they play knight bd7, very smart. Now with the ideas after I play bishop e2, they play b5, and suddenly I felt the pressure. I think that practically this is very difficult to play because they're starting queenside play. My bishop is not on d3 like it normally is active on, and my knight on e5 isn't actually doing much. So now I'm forced to take on c5 to kind of, loosen the structure there. Bishop takes c5 castles, bishop e7, and now I waste another move, bishop d3. I kind of have to. But now we see that black is playing for strategic advantages here, saying that my knight on c3 is just bad. And so my knight would have loved to be on d2, for example, and maybe pawn on c4 way earlier. But now this is just a bad position. After castles, knight e2, my knight is kind of struggling to find any squares, but it has to go somewhere. After knight takes e5, bishop e5, bishop d6. Now after black exchanges their third bishops, they get a free-flowing pawn center. And this is just, I think, very difficult to play for white. also after knight g3, because my knight doesn't have any squares it can actually go to and be, satisfied. So I'm forced to play knight g3, but knight would have loved to be on f3 instead, and pawn on d4, for example. Like maybe this structure, the pawn on would be good for white, but this is not. e5, rook e1, rook fd8, c3, and now I'm just like lacking space. I'm lacking any play, and they immediately play b4, starting a minority attack. Here I play c4, which is a big mistake, because now after takes, bishop takes c4 and queen c6, everything is being attacked. My bishop, my pawn on g2 with mate, and my queen also. So I just lost this game very quickly, and it shows that choosing lines that try to get your opponent out of their comfort zone and trying to play for strategic edges, that I think is the most sound and sound way to go, especially if you're playing with the black pieces, because as the black player with the black pieces, you're playing a reactionary game and trying to choose your setup based on what is doing. So hopefully this was useful. I don't want you to be choosing opening lines that were just recommended by a course or a book, and just suddenly getting like a much worse position or position you don't like. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.